It's time to Let's Talk. All right, what's up? What's good? Wolf's here with another Let's Talk video. So recently we've seen a lot of games start coming out for the Switch that are pushing the Switch to kind of its limits. It's not like its breaking point, but it's making the system chug. So I figured it'd be kind of a fun little thing to deep dive into, just a refresher on exactly what makes up the Switch, what's the hardware in the Switch, what we could use for upgrades, and how they could possibly make those upgrades happen for a Switch Pro. Who knows if we're going to be seeing the Switch Pro anytime soon, but there's a lot of signs pointing towards that probably a new piece of hardware is in the works. I mean, we know they're working on it, but it could be very much in the works for the next year or two, to be revealed and also coming out maybe by the end of 2021, possibly starting to mid 2022. There's a good chance we might be seeing a Switch Pro. It also, I guess, aligns with the timeline of which Nintendo kind of works on stuff. Here we are. So I wanted to deep dive into, like I said, the specs of everything, but I'm also going to be putting the specs of the current Switch and the docking bay, because the docking bay is very important when it comes to going full screen and playing it on your TV screens and everything. And I will definitely say that I notice it is really stretching. So the system is rendering at looks like multi-touch capable touchscreen at 720p. So it is rendering at 720p and on the 6.2 inch LCD screen. Now, when you put it into the docking bay, that 720p is trying to get stretched up to a 1080 on however big your display is. So the bigger your TV or monitor, because a lot of people use monitors for gaming on nowadays, depending on how big that is, I'm running a 27 inch Asus. It looks very blurry, and that's because it's trying to take the 720 low ends, signal and trying to stretch it across to make it a 1080p on a bigger screen. It works. It comes with its flaws, though, because you are going to have that blurry image. It's almost like if you're running a PC game on mid settings, or if you turn your current console down to 720p, you'll notice a significant decrease in clarity in the pictures, just the way the resolutions work. So, one thing that definitely, this right here, custom Tegra processor by NVIDIA. So your PlayStation, your Xboxes are running AMD technology, and the big graphics cards that everybody are trying to get of the 20 series and the 3080s, 3090s, 3070s, whatever, they're all made by NVIDIA. That is a GeForce, usually, that's the graphics cards that everybody's trying to get. But what's in the consoles is AMD, totally different company, totally different make on the chipsets and everything. I'm kind of wondering if this is a older model Tegra processor. So we have the Wi-Fi, of course, LAN adapter you can do, so you can turn your Switch into a hardwired system, 32 gigs internal space, and then you can do up to a 2 terabyte SD card, which I am actually using. Video output, 1080p via TV mode, 720 built-in screen in tabletop mode and handheld mode. So the dock, I can't pick it up and show it on. I brought props today, but I can't show that one. So I'm thinking all the game engines are probably built for the mobile screen, which is in your handheld mode, which is built for 720p, because that's what that display is doing. And then that is trying to really up-res it to a 1080 display. This is all stuff that we've known, since it came out. This thing launched back in 2017, I think it was. So the original Switch debuted in 2017, with 2019 being the year of the Switch Lite. Given the 2-year cycle, it seemed natural that Nintendo's highest selling console in 2021 will be a Switch Pro. So this is actually, I would say this is concept. This is definitely concept art that Nintendo Life is making up, or they're getting from somebody else on the internet that made this up. But this is probably a very good estimate of what the next Switch is going to look like. I don't know if they're going to keep this, the little bezels up top. I would say they're probably going to go something like your cell phone design, where it goes to each edge of the screen and there is like no bezels, where that picture has a little bit of a bezel. If they did that kind of design to where you have, you have your Joy-Cons on both sides of the screen, but go directly, like copy the hell out of Samsung and do, no bezels at all. That'd be pretty cool. The technology that Switch is running is basically the same technology as this. This has a 1440p display on it. Your Switch only has a 720. It's getting a little bit, the technology is absolutely getting a little bit on the older side, just from looking at this, a 720 display with docking mode. So you have to use a whole separate dongle basically just to make it run at 1080. I know dongle, haha. So stereo, power button, USB-C, that's standard for everything. 3.5. Okay, so headphone jack, sensor. Yes, that's right. This has a gyroscope built into it, so kind of that PlayStation S technology of, the PlayStation controllers have always had that gyroscope ever since PS3. Decent battery. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's pretty much. Oh, and then Joy-Cons. So all your standard amounts of buttons, they are Bluetooth, which is pretty standard nowadays for all that. I think they'll probably stick with Bluetooth for the next for the Switch Pro. With the docking bay still doing, like, if you want to do just a hardwired USB connection between your Pro controller and the dock going to your Switch, then that'll still be there too. But yeah, Bluetooth 3.0, they'll probably end up sticking with that. Gyroscope and all that stuff, they'll probably stick with that, keep that in there. HD rumble. Now, the funny thing about the Switch is the Switch has been, so the DualSense is basically a advanced version of this HD rumble. It's not really a rumble, it's a vibration in the Switch. I think this is the wrong labeling of it. First of all, it is not a rumble. A rumble is what you get of like this, where it is tumblers in there that spin around and give you a rumbling effect. You have a smaller one and a bigger one. They spin around and give you the vibration of your gun or your sword or whatever you're doing in game. These, it is literally a little vibration motor in there that is, I don't know if it's two of them or if it's one in these, but I do know that in this, it's an advanced version of this. And this is where Sony versus Nintendo kind of, they go back and forth trying to innovate on technology, because as I've said before, this is just an advancement of this. And this was an advancement of like the DS, So, and really this is kind of trying to be the cell phone. Like the Switch is trying to be a cell phone, but a gaming version of it. Like this is almost like the Switch is almost like an N-Gage, but a working modern day N-Gage in a sense, Let's see here. So yeah, definitely I think they're going to go bigger with the screen. I mean, hell, so it's a 6.2 inch display. The phone I'm rocking right now is a 6.9. Because I got the Ultra, but a regular cell phone, a lot of people are using Samsungs nowadays, are 6.7. So I think screen wise, I think if they went with maybe a 7 or an 8, I mean 9 and 10 would be really big. That's, you're getting into like Apple phone territory, and I think that they still want to keep it to where it is going. They don't want to be selling a tablet. They do want to keep it to so it's pocket size. So I think maybe a 7 or 8 inch display. If you get rid of all this bezel stuff and go full screen with it like this, I think you can end up getting this up to maybe a 7 or an 8 inch. Maybe make the whole system just maybe an inch bigger. Get all that bezeling out of there. Go bezel-less. There's your like 2 extra inches of a screen. It's going to be OLED possibly, which is actually the same as this screen, and the Vita screen looked really good. OLED is one of those things. It really works well for your touch sensitive touchpad stuff, and it looks very well for coloring. Your black levels look very well in it and everything. So OLED is a solid choice to go with if the rumors, are, nothing's been really leaked. It's all rumor stuff. So that would be a good upgrade, solid upgrade for the Pro. Maybe the battery life also they could upgrade that, just like just like we see with cell phones all the time. Battery life upgrades always happen. They're not huge upgrades, but they definitely happen. Multi-touch, screen easily. Our cell phone technology has, if you pinch and pull on the screen, multi-touch, no problem at all. That said, plenty of rumors suggesting Nintendo's next generation of Switch ready to go production soon. If they are set to go into production, then the R&D is already done, which means that probably by Christmas time we'd end up seeing a new Switch on the market. Last summer, Nintendo rolled out a silent update for the standard Switch hardware, which reportedly used the same improved Tegra X1 chipset found in the Switch Lite. Huh. So let's go over here and Tegra API X1. Bingo. All right. So we're looking at just underneath a 2 gigahertz processor, which is, so a standard cell phone is actually running at 2.2.5 to. So my cell phone actually has a higher clock speed than the Switch does. As I keep saying, the Switch is actually pretty low end technology for what you're getting. At the same time, a cell phone costs almost double the price of what a Switch does. So, you're getting what you pay for with the Switch, basically. Offering existing machine improved Tegra X1 would only be offered so much. Yeah, they need to, if they want to be keeping up with the newer games, they're going to have to, I'm not quite sure which one of these chipsets could actually be implemented into a handheld. So it all depends on, what they can end up using it for. If any of these have been used for like cell phone technology, then absolutely. This is where I'm a little bit out of my depth of expertise when it comes to the hardware side of things. I know consoles and I know computers. So when it comes to cell phone stuff, I'm a little bit fuzzy on the cell phone thing of like what they can actually make small enough to implement into the hardware. That's, the chip dies and all that stuff. If they can end up using something on this frequency level though, of like roughly over a 2 gigahertz, then you can end up getting possibly up there towards a 1440p, with still like 30 FPS probably, because I think you need roughly about a 2.5 gigahertz to do more. You're just barely going to be hitting in the 50 FPS mark. Probably about 3 gigahertz would be a 1440p 60 FPS. If with a docking bay use also, not just saying like, although this can do it, this can actually end, as I said, roughly, 2.5. Okay, so 2.5. 3 if you're overclocking, maximum clock speed up to a 3 for overclock. I guess if they went with, 2.5, so 2.2. So they would have to do maybe like an Xavier chipset. Tegra X2 can do a 2. It's still low end. It'd still be low end. So if they update it from a Tegra X1 to a Tegra X2, then it's still going to be chugging slightly. Speculate Nintendo will seek leverage NVIDIA's DLSS. That's another, so this would be a huge one too. If they can run DLSS on a Switch Pro, which if they are using NVIDIA's chipset technology, DLSS absolutely can handle that stuff. That's what all your graphics cards are running right now, is DLSS and RTX. You mix those two together, RTX takes a ton of resources away. DLSS though works wonders with keeping your frame rate up. So frame rate, the reason why a lot of people are stressing about frame rate now and people are starting to smarten up about frame rate is because if you're running at 30 versus a 60, 60 is going to be way smoother on your controls overall. So if you're trying to do something like Monster Hunter where you got to run and jump and dash and everything else, or if you're playing something like a Crash Bandicoot on the system where again you're running and you have to do like split-second timings on the controls and such, or if you're playing a Fortnite, an Apex, or something like that, where you have to have that very twitch sensitive, running and gunning and such. You're going to want to have more frames. It's active frames. The higher frame rate that you have, the more frames that you have to make your character control with. So if the Switch can end up doing even 1080 60 FPS and make 1080 the standard, where it when you plug it into the dongle, it's not blowing the image up, but it's just already native 1080, and then maybe they have the docking bay, which can blow it up to, upscale it to a 1440p signal. Usually 1440 can hold a more steady frame rate. If you mix that with DLSS 2.0 especially, you're going to be holding a very steady high-end frame rate with a very clear picture. So the Switch Pro, even if they do just that small jump up of technology, they could actually make a very decent, solid system. You can't help but to compare the Switch Pro to the PS5, because the reason why I say this is something like a Monster Hunter Rise or an Apex Legends or even Fortnite or Rocket League, or unless it's a first party Nintendo exclusive on the Switch title, those games are being optimized for higher end technology like a PS5 or a Series X. So I mean, it's being optimized for a 3.5 gigahertz with all these teraflops, RDNA 2, which is actually an AMD chipset. The Xbox and the PlayStation are run very similarly for that. It's just the SSD is what's making the PS5 run, I think, better than the Xbox Series X. Sorry, Xbox fans out there, but the PS5 is actually run things smoother. So you have to compare the Switch Pro, this Switch versus the PS5. You have to compare it because third-party titles are optimized for the bigger hardware and then downscaled. Like, they're turning all the settings down and dropping the resolution down and everything to fit onto this system. So in my book, you kind of have to compare them side by side. Now, again, very easily, if they make the docking bay to where you can upscale to hit the 1440p, it will keep up with this decently, especially for like online competitive natures and everything. This system can keep up with the PS5 if they are smart about it. They just have to they have to do hardware rendering the right way. They already have a heads up, or a with the DLSS stuff, this AI upscaling techniques can easily put it on like the low end settings of a PS5. You can reach up to that. So there's a lot of good news for the Switch Pro. So how would I do a Switch Pro if I was Nintendo? What I would do is I would use the NVIDIA technology, this Tegra processor. I would make a processor that is probably 2.8 to maybe a 3 gigahertz processor. I would definitely stretch out the screen to probably about an 8-inch screen. Definitely make it run at 1080 standard in handheld mode, so it's not so blurry. Then the docking bay, I would add a bit of a chipset in there so it can upscale and the rendering of the image up to 1440p for monitors, because most monitors can do 1440p no problem, and a lot of monitors are actually they are 1440p monitors now. Most everybody that's run on like PCs, they're running 1440p with high frame rates of like 144 and up. That's been a pretty good standard, because your consoles a lot of times are running 120 hertz. So, you know, the most, and in all honesty, most all TVs, if it's a flat screen TV and you buy it within the last 10 years, you can do 4K. You can do 4K 60. So, also I'd keep it HDMI. I would add an Ethernet port onto, so you don't have to buy a separate adapter. I would absolutely add an Ethernet port into the docking bay. I would maybe do a Wi-Fi signal booster on the docking bay if they are absolutely dead set on doing Wi-Fi, which I think Japan is kind of starting to try and get away from Wi-Fi a little bit. Bluetooth 4.1 for wireless. Okay. I would keep with the Bluetooth stuff for wireless gaming, absolutely, but I would also make it so that you have basically just like your cell phone comes with a USB-C on, a two-ended USB-C cable, one that plugs into the wall outlet and then one that plugs into your phone. I'd give all the Switch players or packaging with the Pro controller or whatever. I would definitely give them that too. When you're using this to put the Joy-Cons into, put a USB, because there is no USB-C adapter thing. Put a USB-C on here so you can make this a wired controller. So it's USB, even on the bottom, because this, if they stick with the USB-C, there's a USB-C on the bottom of this. Whenever you put it into the docking bay, it's clicking into a USB-C. So make this have a USB-C port on it, and then you can do a wired connection directly onto this. Then your controls are going to always be, you don't even have to use Bluetooth. You can literally always have a nice, solid, hardwired connection to your system. I would think that would just be common sense to do that, but for some reason, Nintendo didn't want to go there with it. So yeah, as I guess a bit of a recap, 1080p display, make it roughly about 8-inch display. I would keep the Bluetooth, but make it easily hardwired, especially on the little Joy-Con adapter thing. I would make a resolution upscaler, possibly DLSS 2.0 in the docking bay. Docking bay would definitely come up as a bigger price tag, but if they did this also with the docking bay, you could technically, in theory, upscale the rendering on this. So you could actually make the resolution go even higher on your Switch by plugging into the docking bay. So then the docking bay would act as kind of a graphics card of such. And then you could possibly just keep your regular Switch and upscale it so it would be less blurry through the more advanced docking bay. I would think the docking bay, if they did it that way, you could actually do the docking bay for cheaper too than buying a whole new system. That would come with the docking bay, of course. One thing I've definitely heard is that the Pro controllers, if you got the original version 1 or Gen 1 of the Pro controllers, those are having problems. I've heard that the Gen 2 or the newest version of the Pro controllers, they fixed a lot of the issues that we're having there with like Bluetooth input latency, and then also some dropped inputs, which I think the dropped inputs might be coming from the technology and the Switch just being so low end that the system resources not keeping up with it. With the Switch Pro, that would hopefully fix that stuff. Like Monster Hunter, there's definitely been some dropped inputs in Monster Hunter. It could also be the game engine just not having the so one thing we learned dramatically with Cyberpunk is that older technology, if it doesn't have the bandwidth to load stuff properly, you're going to have, drops in inputs. You're going to have drops in the way that data is just sent and received in the game engine, and that turns into chaos in the game itself, where stuff doesn't load, where all the stuff all the horror stories that you're seeing of Cyberpunk comes from the data not being able to render the right way on your screen. So yeah, I think I'm painting kind of a pretty solid picture of what I would like to see the Switch Pro be. Again, I don't know what Nintendo has up their sleeves. I don't know what they're planning on doing. It's kind of hard to tell because Nintendo is kind of secretive. And I mean, we are in the age of like rumors and leaks and everything. Are we going to be seeing it this year? I think there's a good chance we might end up seeing a Switch Pro this year, maybe around Christmas time for a launch release. I would say there's a pretty solid chance of that. Is it guaranteed? No, absolutely not. Things can be pushed back. It might come out next year or something. If they come across a problem that they just can't fix easily, then especially with pandemic, working from home situations, R&D is definitely a tighter situation than whatever it was before. All that stuff goes into a factor of when they can actually put the system out. Are we going to see it sometime soon? I would say within the next 4 months we'll end up seeing, if there is a solid chance of the Switch Pro coming out. I think in the next 4 months we'll end up seeing it easily. But yeah, I think like I said, I think I painted a pretty solid picture of what I think the Switch Pro would be. But I would love to see the Switch do something dramatically, better than where it is now, and that comes in the form of upgrading the technology a bit. We need better technology on Nintendo's part. I know that they want to do something that is affordable, which is totally understandable, and they want to do something form factor that you can take on the go. That's awesome too. That's something totally different than any other company's doing. But I definitely think that they need to upgrade. We need an upgrade. We need a solid upgrade, because games like Monster Hunter Rise are chugging along. When you have multiple monsters on screen, the frame rate really dips. When you're trying to play Apex, especially because that game engine can't scale as well as like the RE engine, oh boy, you aim in and I think it goes down. I want to say it's like 15 FPS. I don't know for certain because I don't have the tools enough to really check out frame rate, but if you slow down a video, it is really chugging along on something like an Apex Legends. That could easily be fixed with better technology. They could patch update it to run, at a higher resolution and everything. I definitely would say that the resolution wise on Apex, when you put it on a big screen, it is blurry. So they're having a tough time bringing it up to 1080p even. Again, we just need an upgrade. So, yeah. Anyways, that's my words on the Switch, and hopefully some of them come true. That's kind of my blueprint for the whole thing. So, yeah, I guess thanks for tuning in. Thanks for stopping by. And as always, I will see you next time.